So we Good morning. I'm William Murdoch, the Executive Director of the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission in Columbus. You know us as MORPC. We're the council of governments for more than 70 cities, villages, townships, and counties and regional organizations in the 15-county Central Ohio region, Ohio's fastest growing region. And I'd like to welcome you to the 2021 Ohio Conference on Freight. MORPC is pleased to be the virtual host for the conference this year. And although we wish you could be experiencing all that Columbus has to offer in person, especially with this great weather, we're thrilled to have this conference taking place again after a one-year hiatus. You know, it's been a tough year for everyone, and I hope this finds you, your family, and your team well as the vaccines allow us to see the light at the end of the tunnel. You know, with the past year filled with unprecedented challenges, this year's conference will highlight the theme of freight on the front line. We'll focus not only on how the freight industry was affected by the pandemic, but also on how it can begin to move forward as we emerge from this global health crisis. So Central Ohio is the fastest growing region in the Midwest over the last 10 years. And with the growth, our focus has remained on having a multimodal transportation system that moves efficiently, gets people the goods and the products they want and that they need. But when we had a need for personal protective equipment and other medical supplies, mixed at the same time with a sharp increase in online retail, oh my, this past year showed us just how important the freight and logistics industry is. And so whether you're here to learn more about supply chain logistics, smart transportation tech, or public policy that supports freight-related transportation or economic development, I hope you enjoy the range of conversations ahead and you learn a lot. So of course the conference wouldn't be possible without the support of our sponsors. And first I'd like to thank our friends at the Ohio Association of Regional Councils, a group of regional councils like MORPC across Ohio. This group makes the Freight Conference come to fruition year after year. And the Ohio Department of Transportation, Director Jack Marchbanks and his entire team at ODOT, they're friends to all of us and they keep Ohio moving so that we can do all that we need to do. And Jobs Ohio, as Ohio's economic development arm, Jobs Ohio works hard every day to seize new opportunities and help companies throughout the state find success, and they have a great focus on freight and logistics. So thanks to our generous sponsors as we look forward to a great conference on freight today and tomorrow. So ODOT and Jobs Ohio, along with Drive Ohio and the Ohio Rail Development Commission, are the kickoff to the conference and an exciting opening panel. And to get things started, I'd like to introduce you to my friend and colleague, someone you all know who has a passion for transportation, new tech, and expertise about how to get people and goods to where they need to be, MORPC's own Thea Ewing, our Director of Transportation and Infrastructure Development. Take it away, Thea.
Thank you, William. First, I would like to introduce our panelists. Also with us is the Ohio Turnpike, too. So kicking it off, first up is Farzan Ahmed, and he is the Executive Director of the Ohio Turnpike and Infrastructure Committee. We also have on our panel today Mark Locker, AICP and Program Manager at the Ohio Department of Transportation for Maritime, Freight, and Logistics. Megan McClory, Secretary Treasurer with the Ohio Rail Development Commission. And Luke Stedke, Managing Director with Communications and Policy at Drive Ohio. So let's start our conversation this morning. And so the first question I have for our panelists is, the last year and a half has changed the way that many people are doing business in the state of Ohio and across the world. And from your agency perspective, what changes happened in the freight industry, and how did your agency come to help? And I'm going to start off with Farzan Ahmed at the Ohio Turnpike. Good morning, Farzan.
Good morning, Thea, and good morning to my fellow panelists, all good friends. This is more like a reunion. Thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this panel. Thea, in a nutshell, freight drove the economy last year. When we look at the economy in general, the traffic on the Ohio Turnpike has historically been a very good indicator of the economy of Ohio for some reason, because perhaps it's because we have instantaneous numbers. So at the height of the pandemic, traffic was down about 70% at the Ohio Turnpike. That's huge. And I think we saw the same thing throughout the state. And of that 70%, the portion for commercial trucks was about 20 to 25% in the month of April and May of 2020. And then we started seeing those numbers come back. I guess everybody was running to the local grocery store and stocking up on toilet paper and other things, and somebody had to deliver that. So literally, it was freight that was delivering all the goods and driving the economy. And we saw those numbers started rising. At the same time, we were looking at all the restrictions because of the pandemic, and one of those restrictions was, of course, all the restaurants were shut down. And we also started benchmarking with some of the other turnpikes, some of the other toll agencies. And there were a lot of knee-jerk reactions that shut down the service plazas, travel stops, and so on and so forth. We decided to do just the opposite. We were in very close contact with the Ohio Trucking Association. And we thought that when truckers stop at a service plaza, it's not just about taking a break and fueling up, it's about safety. These guys are tired. They've been driving day and night all over the country. So we wanted to make sure that they had a safe place, a physically safe place for them to stop. And we worked very closely with our vendors to make sure that some sort of food was available 24/7. And late at night, it was perhaps just a cold sandwich, but something was available. We also wanted to make sure that from a sanitation perspective, that the truckers were taken very good care of. The Ohio Turnpike has 14 service plazas. These are very large buildings, and we have janitorial contracts which are based on square footage. So instead of cutting back on our expense, and every agency had to cut back on expense, and so did we, but instead of cutting back on our expense when it came to our janitorial contracts, we shrunk the area. Since the restaurants were closed, the common areas were closed, we decided to concentrate on the truckers area, that sanitize after each use and just increase the level of sanitization to make sure that everybody is safe. It worked out very well. The trucking industry came back. At the end of 2020, our numbers when it comes to vehicle miles driven and freight traffic was the same as 2019. And I think that goes to our own habits. Everybody was ordering online, and the truckers were delivering. So they kept going, and we adjusted our operations to make sure that we could facilitate their work as best as we could.
Oh, wow. The Turnpike did an amazing job in Ohio to make sure that the industry was well supported. I kind of wonder what was going on at ODOT. Mark, tell us a little bit more about how the pandemic hit ODOT.
Oh, very similar to the Turnpike Commission. The pandemic hit all states, and we collectively started working together as a group, as a block. USDOT responded very quickly and allowed us to raise truck weights to 100,000 pounds. That typically went throughout the region to allow more PPE, as long as they were carrying medical and PPE type equipment. They were allowed to raise those weights a little bit and carry more, be more efficient for the trucks that were out there. We also allowed food trucks to be at rest areas, and that's something that was very unusual. We had to work a little bit of a deal with the blind vendors who run the vending units, but as long as the food trucks sold products that the vendors did not have inside, so hot sandwiches, as Farzan said, that was allowed, and that really helped the trucking industry tremendously. In that you can't drive a truck through a drive-through, and a lot of restaurants were shut down, and so we wanted to make sure that they were fed and they had a place to rest. Of course, enforcement was a little eased up on ramps, on undesignated parking on ramps and others, because we wanted to make sure that they had a safe place to park. We also launched a truck parking study and analysis to try to look statewide at what our supply and demand is for truck driving and truckers, and try to see where those gaps are and where we can add additional infrastructure if possible, to maybe squeeze in some additional trucks, and then also technology as well. Those were some of the main things. We as Farzan said, we saw an immediate drop in all traffic, both vehicular and truck, and then we truck traffic then immediately started spiking upward, meaning that those grocery stores needed to be restocked, that people needed Amazon and eBay and other things delivered to their door. Food vendors were starting to deliver more at the door. So we saw a shift in teleworking and more working from home, and then a lot more truck traffic on the highways.
All right. Well, it sounds like ODOT was really on the case there. Talk to us a little bit about the Rail Commission, Megan. What did the Rail Commission do, and what was happening in the rail freight industry?
I think a lot of the story was very similar in terms of what happened with railroad traffic. The railroads were also designated as essential, so as long as there were goods to move, then the railroads were moving them. And we heard some stories from railroads around the state, like the Indiana and Ohio delivering alcohols to Procter & Gamble in Lima to produce hand sanitizer. So there was a key role there for the railroads. And the commission's role was a little bit different than what the Turnpike experienced and what ODOT experienced, because we're not actually operating the infrastructure. So we are in more of a support role. And so we were helping kind of pass information back and forth between the railroad industry and the administration in terms of how the state was responding to the pandemic overall. For the commission itself, we had a really great opportunity that presented itself very early on. The Federal Railroad Administration announced a funding opportunity on April 17th. So I think we were all still trying to kind of figure out what the new lay of the land was in teleworking and what was going to happen. And here we had this great opportunity with a due date in mid-June. And so our staff immediately was able to kind of pivot and start working on applications. And we actually submitted 4 applications and received funding for all 4 of them. So we were able to bring in almost $12 million in federal funds to rail projects that's being matched by more than $9 million in private funds from the railroads. So we were really able to take advantage of that opportunity, which was some of the kind of earliest federal money that was going out to project development.
Wow, what an awesome team, really bringing things together for our state. And let's round it up now with Drive Ohio. Luke Stedke, talk to us a little bit about the pandemic and its impact on the freight industry from the kind of new and next perspective.
Well, as Farzan said, it's kind of like a class reunion. I get to work with all these great people on a daily basis. And we really, we get spoiled at Drive Ohio because we really get to talk about the cool stuff, because we sit at the intersection of technology and transportation. And I think what all 3 individuals had said before me is just the spirit of innovation that was unlocked. You look at the beginning of the pandemic with the drop in traffic, and then towards the last, 6 months specifically, just the explosion of traffic on the system. So when it comes to smart mobility, we saw a lot. We broke it down into on the ground and in the air, right? At Drive Ohio, we talk about innovation, automation, connected and electrification on the ground and in the air. So on the ground side, you saw a lot of long haul technology. Farzan and his team at the Turnpike partnered with Drive Ohio, ODOT, and our partners in Michigan and Pennsylvania for a Smart Belt Coalition demonstration of truck platooning technology with Locomation, November of last year. As we speak right now, Plus AI is traveling from California to Ohio in platoon. So the innovation is happening as we speak. Also on the ground, with the transportation budget, language for last mile delivery. The legislature increased the weight that sidewalk delivery vehicles like the Neros or the Starship,
Cool.
It's working out of Bowling Green, that's delivering stuff in the city and on campus, increase that weight. So it's really about innovation. And then, of course, in the air, we see all of these systems coming together. I get, the one thing that is most interesting over the last year that we'll see just, really scale over the next 2 to 5 years is how all of these initially siloed technologies will overlap and really develop and deploy a new transportation system. So you look at the work that Drone Express and Telegrid are doing in Centerville, in Ohio with Kroger, talking about drone delivery. So the expansion of these technological innovations to long haul and then also to last mile is really been very interesting to see in real time.
Thank you, Luke. Yeah, I feel like we're firing on all cylinders coming out of this pandemic, and that our economy is in really great shape. And thank goodness for our great leaders at the state that are helping us with our infrastructure to ensure that businesses can go back to business as usual. So kind of interested in your perspective, and I'm sure many around the state are too, and in the Midwest, as to, are we heading into things that will be changes that we're going to see into the future? We're all planning. Is there going to be changes in the future to the freight and logistics industry based on this period of time? Are there any general threats out there that any of you are seeing? Or are we just going to go back to business as usual and things are... What do you know on that?
Sorry, Thea, you cut out at the end.
Or are to the...
Thea, we can't hear you. You sort of cut out at the end.
On it. Hang tight. Just let me know when you can hear me. Did my mic die? I see me lighting up on the screen. I'm still here. Just let me know.
You're good.
We can see you and we can hear you.
You can hear me?
Yeah,
Okay.
You're back to normal.
All right, cool. So Mark, you're first up. And are there any lasting impacts from the pandemic or general threats to the freight and logistics industry? Or are we going to be going back into business as usual?
I think business as usual that's going to come out of this. I think this has changed us. A lot of these technologies and e-commerce that were already trending, and this just accelerated things a lot more quickly. One of the things that we saw almost immediately is domestic sourcing of goods. So instead of more of a global sourcing of products, we started pulling back in a little bit, at least during the pandemic. And started sourcing domestically. And then as we talked about, e-commerce just really took off. They were going strong before, but now there's a higher demand than ever for goods to be delivered to the door. In fact, on my street on any given day, I can see every single carrier that exists that's dropping off, picking up products. Technology is definitely taken off. Conferences like this, where we used to meet in person, we're now doing these by web. We also have cyber threats. You're talking about threats. We saw the Colonial Pipeline, how a single pipeline can shut down 45% of the eastern seaboard of the United States. And immediately USDOT responded by asking the other modes to shift, ease restrictions, and start shifting things from U.S. Maritime Administration, lifting some of the Jones Act requirements and allowing foreign vessels to redirect and start delivering to different parts of the United States. We already have that in Ohio. The Ohio River delivers a lot of our fuel particularly into the Cincinnati area. Almost 100% of the fuel comes in via barge on the Ohio River. So that really helped the state of Ohio. You also see a lot of infrastructure issues. You saw the Memphis Bridge with a big crack that shut down the Mississippi River and majored traffic east-west in the Memphis area. You saw the Brent Spence Bridge have a catastrophe in the middle of a pandemic where a truck overturned and major fire, shut it down for several weeks. I give great credit to our partners in Kentucky and our good forces down in District 8 and Ohio for working on that. That probably brings back nightmares for Mr. Farzan Ahmed when he was with us earlier, who had to deal with that a few years ago. Very similar situation where it just snarls traffic right at the height of things. And that Brent Spence Bridge, by the way, is the #2 congested location in the United States, listed by ATRI recently. So that really, really impacted the Cincinnati, Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky region, and brought to light infrastructure, which is being discussed currently in Congress and what we're going to do about it. We also saw issues with the Suez Canal with a big ship that sort of jackknifed, so to speak, in the middle of the canal and blocked everything. Why would a major container ship in the Suez Canal affect the United States? Well, because that's where all of our goods are coming to the East Coast. And then once they got it unblocked, everything hit the East Coast all at once. So again, traffic jam on the East Coast trying to unload that cargo. So there are just threats to our system all over the place. But the United States is very agile and will adjust and adapt as we need to keep that cargo rolling.
Wow, it sounds like the pandemic wasn't just a pandemic for the people, that it was a pandemic for our actual vehicles that we need too, when you hear Mark run down a list like that. But, we're resilient. We got through these things. And the people, actually, was the interesting part that make these things turn around. So, Megan, how's it going on the rail side? Are they going to be going back to business as usual, or any major threats you foresee?
One of the railroaders that we've worked with a lot likes to frequently remind us that the success of the railroads is dependent on the success of their customers. And so based on that, I think it's a little too soon to tell what the long-term impacts are going to be. When you look at total rail car loads, those have recovered to 2019 levels, but it's not across the board. Weekly intermodal traffic is really strong, as we heard from those who work with the trucking industry. Those shipments had recovered back to above 2019 levels by mid-July of last year. And through last month, intermodal traffic's been exceeding both 2019 and 2020 on a consistent basis. So there's a lot of goods moving via intermodal containers. The Port of Long Beach just recorded its strongest April on record. So import traffic is really strong. But when you dig into some of the carload data, some of those other commodities, a lot of those are consistently below 2019 levels still. It's really kind of a mixed bag. Food products, farm and forest products are strong, but there's weakness in automotive shipments based on some of the supply challenges that they're facing in the automotive industry. And, the food and farm categories and the forest products, that mirrors what we see at the grocery store and what we see when we're going to try to buy a couple of 2x4s at Home Depot, that, there's a lot of activity in those areas. So, based on all that, I think it's really kind of a mixed bag right now. And I think we're going to need a little bit longer to see what the impacts are on the overall economy before we can say what the impact is going to be long-term on the rail industry.
Thank you, Megan. And I think, it may be stating the obvious, but one thing that you've already heard from Megan is kind of that litmus test will be pre-2019 levels of traffic. So that's kind of what we're trying to determine, is if we're hitting those, that is some sign of success. So Luke, where are we going in innovation? I think that's a continuous stream. But I feel like, too, that conversation about innovation in the future was impacted quite a bit during this period. So tell us what you're thinking.
Absolutely. And Megan and Mark make two really good points. First is automation and technology is here to stay, right? I think everybody sees that from a real world perspective. But how we deploy that technology, to Megan's point about the economic and the market deployments, that's going to drive a lot of these use cases. I look to, there's always going to be, it's if anything I've learned over the last 15 years in government and politics is be very careful what you predict. So I think there is going to be there are going to be long-term changes. There's also going to be a regression to the mean on some of this stuff. The one thing that I keep going back to is the ability to get goods to people quickly. And especially when we talk about automation and connectivity in the state of Ohio, when it comes to automated vehicles, I think everyone knows where those first deployments will be. Those are going to be in cities like Miami, San Francisco, New York, places where people are not good at driving, right? Where automation can help ease the pain of travel. Where we're going to see it in the state of Ohio is really going to be freight and logistics. The ability to augment the human in the loop right now with the work that Plus AI, Locomation, these trucking
really
companies and these technology stack providers, we're really talking about augmenting the human being.
3
in
of
the
them
loop
even
thus
swapped
far.
out with the heads, and they're
On the last mile piece, the work that Nero is doing with Kroger in Houston, I think there's a lot of possibility there. I think we're going to see a redefinition of sidewalk space, especially in urban areas, just to try to control how these systems are used and how they are integrated into a system that's 70, 80 plus years old. I think that one of the interesting things about the smart mobility space is how we are going to safely and economically integrate new systems with existing systems that have been around for 80 plus years. So I think innovation is here to stay, but I think we'll see, especially how it's scaled in urban areas versus rural areas. I think you'll see more in the air capabilities for a more rural delivery systems. But I think both on the ground, in the air, urban and rural, you're going to see the start of these systems be corridor-based or specific routes that have been outlined either to beta test or to go to market early on.
all right. And so, where do you think things are going for Zahn?
Luke made a couple of really cool references to technology. He talked about automation in the freight industry, and then he talked about things that might be happening in the air. I'm going to start with that. First of all, I agree with my co-panelists. There's no such thing as going back to normal. Just in our own government operations, every government agency is already looking at remote working policy. And what does that mean to traffic? At the Ohio Turnpike, the passenger traffic is 10% below 2019 levels, but the commercial traffic is 10% higher than 2019 levels. At some point in time, those numbers will come closer, but I don't expect the passenger traffic to go back to 2019 levels because the remote work is going to be a normal part of doing business. So the commercial traffic is going to stay up and higher. But what does that mean? That means more trucks on the road. When there is a crash on the highway involving a truck, it is not a good thing. Does more trucks necessarily mean more crashes? I would like to hope that that is not the case. Especially for the Turnpike, it's a road that's about as flat and as straight as you can build a road for 241 miles. And it's very safe. Our numbers are well below national average for a highway, but that is something that I think about. With 10% more trucks, perhaps there's going to be a little bit more congestion. Perhaps there'll be a few more threats out there in terms of crashes. So what are we doing about that? Well, we've recently met with the Ohio Truckers Association to talk about an education component. Let's get the word out to the truck drivers about what's going on the Turnpike and on the highway. And what kind of word am I talking about? Well, what do we see as causes of crashes? One of the main causes that we see is the condition of tires. So we are working right now with some private sector partners to install tire readers. These are pretty cool devices. It's like a drive-through McDonald's. As your vehicle drives through, it will give you a printout of the condition of your tires, inside, outside, sidewalls and treads and so on and so forth. And of course, it's optional. We haven't implemented it yet, but we are in the process of doing that. And I would love to see that because that will then give a person an idea of what the condition of tires is and maybe attend to it. And if we can address that, then that will even more reduce the frequency of crashes than we see. on the technological side, Luke mentioned you'll see it in freight. Well, we did see it back in October when we, together with the Drive Ohio and with the states of Michigan and Pennsylvania, when we did the demonstration of truck platooning across the Ohio Turnpike. Well, here's the interesting thing we found out. When we were talking to the Ohio State Highway Patrol about regulations and whether this is allowed across the states and all that, one of our lieutenants made a comment that, this is not the first time we had seen an autonomous truck. They actually stopped a truck on the turnpike a couple of months prior to this happening because somebody had called in a truck where the driver was apparently sleeping. So the highway patrolman pulled up behind the truck and pulled the truck over, found out that, well, he was kind of dozing off, but the truck was in autonomous mode. So we don't know what we don't know. They're already out there. I don't know how many of them are out there. But perhaps that's a good sign. Perhaps that's a good sign because this technology is being deployed and it's getting prevalent. Luke also made a comment about air, about things that will happen in the air. So at the turnpike, we have triples. So trailers combined together, we call them long combination vehicles. So since they are not allowed on any road outside of I-80, when trucks enter the turnpike, we have set up and tear down lots. We have about 9 of them across the state, and trucks will get into the set up lots where 3 trailers will be combined together and they'll move on. In a future, when short-term deliveries are being made with the help of drones, are we going to have to adjust those set up and tear down lots to accommodate for things other than vehicles with 4 wheels? Are we going to have to accommodate something that has a couple of propellers and flies? That's something I'm very interested in looking at and making sure that we are relevant and when that technology happens, because that technology will happen. We are also working on a new toll collection system at the Ohio Turnpike. Our current system is a gated system, the typical old-fashioned system that you see. We are moving to what's called an open road tolling system where people are going to be able to drive right through without stopping. When that happens, one of the abilities that we will lose right now, every time somebody comes in, they take a ticket, so we know what the truck is carrying, what the weight is, and so on and so forth. We will lose the instantaneous ability to be able to do that. So the more of a connected environment we can create, the better off our future is in terms of our open road tolling as well, because we really need to know what's in that truck, how much it weighs, and where it's going, and so on and so forth. So we are currently also working with a couple of consultants to upgrade our ITS implementation on the turnpike, and part of that is going to be the connectivity between vehicles and our infrastructure.
Wow, lots going on there on the turnpike. I hadn't even thought about some of the impacts as we evolve, and the fact that autonomous vehicles are already out there and we don't even really know about it. We talk about this all the time, so the general public is really kind of like, what's going on? So I think we're definitely moving towards a future in autonomy for sure. So next question. Often we plan for a system used by the industry and the general public. So I was curious as to what kind of projects that all of you have in the works that are going to benefit the businesses in Ohio as well as Ohioans in general. And I'd like to start with Megan this time. So what kind of things are you guys working on that will benefit business in Ohio at the Rail Commission?
Well, I mentioned it before, but I think it's relevant here too, that ORDC's work is somewhat unique from other areas of the transportation arena in that we are partners, but very rarely are we the infrastructure owner. We're not the primary investor, and we don't control the investment or the use of the infrastructure. So instead, we are always partnering, and we're supporting businesses by helping them access rail service, either as an individual company or we're doing strategic projects to maintain and improve existing rail service. So just kind of looking back, during the last 2 years, commission-assisted projects are committed to create over 700 jobs and retain more than 1,000 jobs. And the projects are also improving rail infrastructure that supports over 7,000 more jobs. Those projects are investing more than $1.4 billion in the state. And so supporting rail service helps businesses locate and expand here, and it helps capitalize on jobs and investment. So that's where a lot of our efforts are focused. That's where we're seeing a lot of activity. And we have no shortage of project inquiries and projects that we're working on that support businesses and then, by extension, support Ohioans and employment opportunities.
All right. Jobs, jobs, jobs. That's what I heard there. Supporting those jobs. Thank you to the Rail Commission for ensuring that for our businesses in Ohio. Luke, what are you doing to support businesses in Ohio?
So from the perspective of the DeWine Houston administration, there's two things of paramount importance vis-a-vis Drive Ohio. One is the safety of the system and the safety of the technology that is running on that system. And very close second is economic development. We know from investments, let's just take electric vehicles. The industry by 2025 is going to have invested $750 billion nationally, internationally, in advanced electric vehicle testing, vehicles, and infrastructure. Companies like GM by 2040 are not going to make ICE vehicles. They've said that publicly. Volvo, Volkswagen has said they are not going to invest in new transmission and engine lines. They will service the ones that they have, but by 2030, they're done. We see the investment in this. And from our perspective, we want to make sure that Ohioans and our workforce are able to compete globally. We also want to secure Ohio's economic future. So Farzan brought up a good point about the different types of technologies that are going to be incorporated into the system. Automation is going to be part of that. Also is connectivity. So our statewide system engineering work, the CVAB guidebook, these are going to set the standards for these communities, this state of Ohio, and hopefully the nation as best practices, bringing this technology to the state, but also interoperability. It's going to be huge. The ability, the same system in Ohio is going to have to work in Indiana. Same system in Indiana is going to have to work in Colorado. So the ability to set those standards, have Ohio lead those conversations, is going to be really important to us as thought leaders, but also our economic future. We just finished up a 2-day conference with Partners for Automated Vehicle Education, the PAVE group. So part of our charge is education, to be able to talk to communities and citizens on currently where the technology is, align where the technology is with expectations of the public, and then to show them how this is going to progress. One of the questions I get almost on a daily basis is, when is this going to happen? When is it going to happen? So to Farzan's point, we're seeing it today, right? We are seeing beta testing. We are seeing, these conversations very quickly merge into all different types of areas. Currently NHTSA doesn't have an FMVSS for automated vehicles because there's no specific automated vehicle being produced, right? That's going to be part of this conversation around regulation and how the federal government sets the guidelines for production moving forward. So at Drive Ohio, we want to make sure that we are part of this conversation, that we are bringing communities together. We did some EV work on siting study for electrification on charging stations. We're finishing up a freight and logistics EV study that Mark and partners have helped out with. So holistically, we want to look at this as a systems-wide approach to bringing transportation into the 21st century.
Thanks, Luke. You hit on a really important point, and that's setting standards and its impact on business. And I will give kind of my own testimony as a leader in a region, planning for our region. I never thought that my job, I guess as I was coming up, would have such a role in setting standards at a national level. But we have been, whether it's our region's role in autonomous vehicle deployment or the conversations we've had with the US DOT on Hyperloop and the new technologies. I mean, regulations are definitely a factor of time, but also a safety concern. And what I can tell my colleagues and other businesses and stuff on the line today is that what we do know is that it may take a while in the United States, and hopefully we can speed that process up. But the United States safety standards are set as nearly a gold standard and considered high in other parts of the world too. So once it can happen here, it can kind of happen about anywhere. So that is a good sign that things are making progress here and that we're a part of that progress. Exciting that we are a part of that progress, and we should be as Ohioans. So Mark, you're last up here as far as this question, and I'll just remind you that is kind of advantages to the general public and businesses as you plan for freight in the future here.
Well, Ohio is blessed, I guess you would say, with the 5th largest transportation or freight system in the United States, and we're only 35th in size geographically. So we have a lot packed into a relatively small geographic area, but we are working on tons of things in the state of Ohio. We are at ODOT. We are very, very busy people, everything from technology to planning and planning for our future. So we're working on the Access Ohio 2045 implementation, our long-range transportation plan. We have the plan in place. Now we're working on the implementation piece. We're also launching, and will complete by the end of this year, Transport Ohio. And Transport Ohio is our statewide freight system. All modes are being analyzed and planned for in a systematic approach. We've also identified our strategic freight system and trying to make sure that we identify those key corridors and freight partners and intermodal connectors that are keeping Ohio's businesses healthy by allowing us that easy move between modes in the state of Ohio. We're also looking at the I-75 corridor, the Gordie Howe Bridge between Canada and the United States. Farzan will probably have more to say about that as well. That there's a lot of traffic. That's the highest and most frequently used freight bridge connection between the two countries. And we want to keep that healthy and down into the I-75 corridor. We've launched this year the Maritime Assistance Program, and so we are investing in our ports and waterways, and including the Port of Cleveland and Toledo. Cleveland has the only containerized port on the Great Lakes, which is a huge advantage for the state of Ohio. Allows that feeder service through the St. Lawrence Seaway and out to the ocean ports. That's a huge advantage in containerized cargo. We're also about, hopefully by the end of this month, be able to announce a statistical port boundary district that we created on the Ohio River between the ports of Huntington Tri-State, ports of Pittsburgh. There was a gap there, and we worked with the Army Corps of Engineers to name it and analyze it, and hopefully be able to announce that by the end of this month. We also are working on truck parking study, trying to analyze and study supply demand, where those gaps are, that we can add some additional infrastructure to that, and then also working with our partners out in Eastern Ohio with the domestic energy of shale gas and oil. We're also working on RAISE grants, infra grants, USDOT grants, trying to bring those federal dollars to Ohio to help robust and bring more to our system and help with that infrastructure. ODOT is responsible for an extremely large system, and we also partner with other modes and other systems as well. So we want to keep all of those healthy for our business partners. So that's, in a nutshell, that's pretty much us.
Thanks, Mark. And something in that I could definitely identify is grants. I think our hands are cramping from the writing of the grants right now, and it's just going to be like that for a little bit as there's probably more recovery financial opportunities, of course, than the new some of the new programs like RAISE or Change programs, and how we're going to play a role in those too. So it's just a very, very exciting time. So now I'm going to move on to the next question. What are you working on today? What's your brag? Like, what's something that we can all look forward to? What are you excited to share? together. And I want to start with innovation because that's always like something that's really exciting for me. So Luke, take it away.
Well, we can just start right here with this group. We're partnering with Frazan and the Turnpike on our I-70 truck automation corridor. So that will be in revenue service, a multi-state deployment between Columbus and Indianapolis, in revenue service trucking, level 2 in truck platooning, and ultimately as the grant matures, level 4 on the Turnpike. So to see these systems in the real world and specific to the level 4 in a space where we think trucking at that level will be scaled in the industry of freight and logistics. And the Turnpike gives us is just a wonderful resource because it's a single law enforcement agency. It's very traffic is heavy, but and correct me if I'm wrong, Frazan, leans towards freight. So it's kind of in its wheelhouse. So that's going to be really exciting over the next 3 years. With Megan and the Rail Commission, the Lieutenant Governor in January announced a project with Innovate Ohio, Drive Ohio, and Spectrum for connecting motorists and in a connected vehicle environment with information around trains. Lima, Ohio has, Megan, correct me if I'm wrong, 132 grade rail crossings. And growing up in Western Ohio, the industry, the city really grew around the industry in the 1870s and 1880s. So a lot of exciting work over there, trying to see how a more traditional system of transportation will be moved into and how some of these systems will be integrated into that more established framework. Mark has helped us out greatly with our freight and fleet electrification study. So there's going to be a lot of, I think, Thea, you had a really good point about the grant process. I think there will be a lot of programs over the next 1.5 to 2 years focusing on innovation, electrification, what we call connected, automated, shared, and electric. I think there's going to be a push from this administration to do that. What we've been talking with local communities is we see an opportunity to really lay a foundation for a smart transportation system that we might not get for another generation. I always go back to the interstate highway system. I'm a big fan of General Eisenhower and then President Eisenhower. The work that he did in 1955 and 1956, whether it's the interstate highway system or the FAA, the regulatory systems, basically for the foundation of the transportation system that we have now, there's going to be a chance to update that and lay a foundation for the future. We've got our ADS grant in Southeast Ohio, seeing how this automation technology is utilized in a more rural setting. 90% of the studies and the deployments for automated vehicles are in urban areas, which is very important, but also we can't forget about how these systems will operate in a rural area. The in the air stuff, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the Agility Prime program out of Springfield Beckley Airport. Mm-hmm. That is the U.S. Air Force literally developing flying cars in Springfield, Ohio. So that's been really interesting to see companies like Beta, Moog, Lyft utilizing Ohio as, I was talking to Tom Frazen, who was the city manager down there. I said, so Tom, what I'm hearing you say is you're going to be the Detroit of advanced air mobility. He said, yes, exactly. So to see these systems and these supply chains evolve in real time, and NASA just announced on Friday, and we were able to announce on Monday that our Ohio UAS Center, the Fly Ohio program, was brought into the national campaign system through NASA. So really bringing these companies, these communities in the state with federal regulators to see, first of all, see how the system will be utilized, but ultimately develop these systems to scale and develop new transportation systems on the ground and in the air. So it's always an exciting time. We've got the 33 Smart Mobility Corridor, a lot of activity, not only in Central Ohio, but across the state. So it's an exciting time to be in Ohio, and it's an exciting time to be in transportation, for sure.
Yeah, Luke, thank you on that. And our closing speaker with Airspace Link is going to do a great job of sharing even a little bit more about the work that they're doing in this area, and I think it's just a really fascinating time, all the work that you guys are doing there. So next I'm going to move on over to, I believe, Farzan, I think is up next. And if you could go ahead and share with us what you're excited about.
Well, Thea, you have often heard me say that I am a hopeless optimistic, and I'm always excited about whatever life brings us. I will make a philosophical comment before I answer your question. I think 2020 was a great year. You heard me right. I think 2020 was a great year. There's a lot we learned. It made us tougher, and I think it has made us better suited to handle 21 and so on and so forth. And I do believe 2021 is going to be a fantastic year, not just for Ohio, but for innovation and for us at the Ohio Turnpike. So the things that we're working on, when we look at what we can do to be relevant in our business, which is a turnpike, we are a publicly owned business. To be relevant, we have to provide the right value to our customer. That's the bottom line. And of course, we have to be resilient. We have to be innovative, and we have to embrace technologies that are renewable and sustainable. So, from an experience perspective, I'm going to talk about the low tech first, real quickly. When a person goes through the turnpike, they are expecting a smooth ride. The condition of the road and the bridge has to be as high as possible because they're paying a premium, they're paying a gas tax, and they're paying a toll to go on our roads. When they stop in our service plazas, they need to have that first-class experience. So one of the low-tech things that we're working on to stay relevant is to improve the brands. So next year, as you start coming onto the turnpike, you're going to start seeing brands like Jersey Mike and Dunkin's and so on and so forth, where in some places we saw lesser-known brands. So I think that's great for the customer experience. The open road tolling system that I described earlier on is also part of customer experience. It is one of the highest forms of advanced mobility in use today. The open and an electronic tolling system is an extremely high advanced use of ITS implementation. And you're going to start seeing that on the Ohio Turnpike. It will be fully implemented by the end of 2023, beginning of 2024. That's going to be great. Now, I talked also about innovation and about resilience. Earlier, I spoke about the truck, the tire monitoring facilities that we are trying to implement. But what we've got right now in our service plazas, Luke made a mention to it, is we have EV chargers. We have 14 plazas and 4 of them already have chargers, and we are working on getting charging stations on all 14. We are working with a certain car maker that likes to have their own plug to have separate chargers for them, and also working with entities to have generic chargers for everybody else. The Turnpike, like ODOT and like other infrastructure entities, owns a lot of land that's not being used. So what are we going to do with that land? We recently made a trip to Georgia to learn a couple of things that the Georgia DOT is doing, and they're building a solar field. So currently the Ohio Turnpike is in the procurement phase of installing a solar field on the Turnpike. What will we get out of that? Our hope is that our investment is going to be our land, and the private entity that comes in will, of course, invest in the infrastructure. We will either get free or cheap energy from it, and then they can do other things with that. Our goal is to either use that energy to power street lights or to a turnpike facility that happens to be right next to it. We have a lot of land, but we are not using all of it initially for this project. We want to start slowly, because 5 years ago, this technology was not as advanced as it is today. And 5 years from today, it's going to be a lot more advanced. So we want to break ground and get used to this, because in the future, one of the things that we're going to work towards is in-lane charging. Now, Thea, your friends in Northeast Ohio at Eastgate, Jim Kinnock, we are working very closely with them in the area of Ohio that is known as Voltage Valley, Lordstown Motors, and so on and so forth. So what we're looking at is, if the future of EV charging is in-lane charging, and they're talking about pilot projects in Europe and other places, well, why not have a pilot project somewhere in Ohio? And what better location than Voltage Valley, where there's so much else going on? And how are we going to charge that? So I think that when we talk about solar energy, I think it's way beyond charging traffic signals or street lighting or even powering one of our service plazas. I think the future of EV charging is going to be solar energy because we are going to need a lot of energy. I'm not sure the grid is able to handle it. See what happened in Texas not too long ago. The grid is not able to handle perhaps 5 or 10 million more vehicles on the road. And what's going to happen when we start seeing freight that needs EV charging? That's a lot more energy. So I think solar energy is going to play a major role in the future of EV charging, if EV charging is the way to go. And right now, that looks like it's going to be the way to go. So that's something that gets us really excited right now is the strides we have taken towards bringing solar technology to the Ohio Turnpike, of course, starting off with just powering what we have, but also looking to the future in terms of charging, in terms of inductive in-lane charging. And I'll be honest with you, as I said, I'm optimistic that someday we will do a project like that in Ohio.
So, Farzan, what I think I just heard you say is we're not just walking on sunshine in Ohio, we're driving on sunshine, and that's pretty awesome. So, I'm going to have, we only got about a minute more, and Mark and Megan, I'm going to give you guys a quick throw here. Tell me something you're really proud and excited to share with folks that are watching today as we close this out.
I'm just going to say that I'm extremely optimistic about the future. I really am. This is the most evolutionary time in infrastructure since the industrial age of the 1900s. We are going to see an entire changing of our system going into the future. At the turn of the 19th century, we started getting into different technologies, and I think we are on the verge of that right now, if not in the middle of it. With technology and expansion in Ohio, I'm proud to say that Ohio is every box you can check. Ohio is there, and we're at the forefront of all of it. So, with that, Megan.
And I would just close by saying we have a whole lot going on. We've got a lot of development projects that are somewhere in the project development and inquiry stage, all the way up through we're administering 7 active federal discretionary awards right now. And then on our grade crossing safety side, we're looking at innovations there, working with Drive Ohio on how we connect connected vehicles to railroad crossings and make sure that the vehicles are getting the right information when there's a train present. We're looking at safety improvements. We're looking at quality of life concerns like occupied crossings due to changes in railroad operational patterns. And so we're trying to look at solutions or ways that we can partner with a whole array of different things. I was a little concerned when we started teleworking that we were going to run out of things to do, and I had no cause for worry. We've got plenty going on.
I think that's so true, Megan. I can't think of a time that I've not been more busy. So this has been an amazing panel. I knew when I put it together it was exciting, but you guys have done fantastic. Kudos. This is me clapping for everyone in Ohio and the Midwest for your great job today. I hope everybody watching has a great Ohio Conference on Freight. Thank you for joining us this morning, and I'm going to see you at the end of the conference. So enjoy. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Thea.
Thank you.